Hello, and welcome to the procurement contract template. Today is going to be a blast because I will be guiding you exactly on how to create a contract. But before we jump into the details of contract creation, let me introduce myself. My name is Sterre Maria, and I am the head of product of Procurement Tactics, and I'm so happy that you are here. Our team has over 20 years of experience in procurement and negotiations, and we train procurement teams from small and large companies from all over the world. I walk you through what a contract is and why it's so important. So, let's dive in and get started. Just like with any topic, it's important to have a clear understanding of what you're writing in order to effectively communicate the messages you want your reader to understand. The same applies when it comes to creating contracts. You need to grasp the concepts and principles involved to ensure your message gets across accurately. A procurement contract is an agreement where the buyer and supplier bind themselves to manage a project. An example of this is when a project team of a company communicates with a supplier. The communication will turn into negotiations to ask for or procure the materials or services they need for the project. The parameters you've agreed upon in the contract work in favor of both of you. It helps protect all parties from any fraudulent or bad faith actions when it comes to fulfilling their obligations. So, it's like a safety net for both parties involved, keeping things fair and honest. Now you know the basics, it's time to have a look at the different steps that come into play. The first step in writing a contract is to write down the contract information of the parties. For a contract to be legally binding, it's important to clearly mention who is bound by the agreement. In other words, you need to provide contact information for all the parties involved. When drafting a contract, make sure to include key details like the business's name, main contact person, physical address, the billing address, and the contact information for both you and the other party. It's best to use your official business's name, exactly as it appears on your incorporation or LLC, limited liability company documents. As you write the contracts, keep using the real names of everyone involved. Skip the generic terms like client, third party, or service provider, because they're making it feel too impersonal. You want to build a friendly vibe with your clients, even though it's not a legal requirement. The second step is to be specific with the terms and scope of the project. By clearly defining the terms, you avoid any confusion or misunderstanding down the road. It's like giving everyone a clear set of instructions, so they know what they need to do and when they need to do it. Let's picture a situation where you're gearing up for an exciting building renovation project and in need of sourcing the required materials. It's important to set the project scope and establish whether the other party will also be responsible for the actual renovation work or if their obligation wraps up once they deliver the materials. Being specific about the scope of the project is important because it sets boundaries and outlines what exactly will be done. It's like drawing a line in the sand so that everyone knows what's included and what's not. This helps prevent any surprises or disagreements later on. The third step is to be clear about payment terms. To make payment terms clear in a contract, it is important to include specific details and guidelines. Firstly, clearly state the payment amount, whether it is a fixed figure or a formula for calculating the payment based on goods or services provided. The fourth step is to set the schedule. Including a schedule in the contract is a way to ensure that everyone is on the same page regarding the project timeline and milestones. It creates transparency and accountability and promotes open communication throughout the renovation processes. With a well-defined schedule, payments can be linked to the completion of specific milestones, giving you peace of mind that a project is progressing smoothly. By working together based on this schedule, we can achieve a successful and timely renovation of your office space. For example, our team will begin the procurement process once we receive the list of required materials from your client. Upon receipt of the list, we will initiate the sourcing and purchasing activities to secure the materials within the specified time frame. The fifth step is to include a stipulation regarding the sudden termination of the contract. Sometimes things don't go as planned in projects. If your client decides to back out of the project and breaks the contract, you want to make sure that your business is covered and that you get paid for the work you've already put in. So to protect yourself, include a clause in the contract stating that any payments you've received are non-refundable in the event of project termination, regardless of the reason. This is especially important if you plan to invoice throughout the project duration. By having this clause, you can safeguard against investing a lot of time and effort, only to have the client bail out and refuse to compensate you for your work. Lastly, ensure that all parties sign the contract. Remember that contracts are only legally binding when both parties have signed them. So once you've got your contract all set and ready, don't forget to put pen to paper and have your client sign it too before you kick off the project. If you're working in a large company and you have help in the setup of your contracts, feel lucky. But if you're a procurement manager in a small company and you are personally responsible for closing deals as well as the setup of the contract, my most important advice to you would be to make sure to create a standard contract for your company that you can send to your suppliers after closing a deal. To help you out with this, we attached a template that you can use in setting up your procurement contract. Firstly, you will see what we call the parties of agreement, where the parties refer to the buyer and the seller involved in the contract. This selection is essentially an introduction, identifying the key players involved in the agreement. It specifies the buyer and the seller by name, their address and contact information. These details are crucial for ensuring the contract's validity, and for easy communication between the parties. Moving on to the table of the details of the deliverables. The table provides in this selection is a catalog of the goods or services being exchanged between the buyer and the seller. It serves to document what is being bought and sold. Each item has a unique serial number, a description, specification, quantity, rate, and the total. Why is this section so important? This section defines the specifics of what is being exchanged, providing a clear and detailed record of the goods or services, including their descriptions, quantity, rate, and total value. This prevents misunderstandings or disputes regarding what is being bought and sold. So let's walk through the table. The serial number is used for numbering each item of the product on the list. It provides a unique identifier for each entry. The item. In this column, you would specify the name or description of the item or the product being listed. This is where you briefly describe what the item is. The specification. This column is used to provide additional details or specifications about the item. Depending on the context, this could include size or model, color, or any other relevant information that helps identify the specific version or variant of the item. The quantity. Here you would indicate how many of each item or product are being considered or listed. It could be a number representing the quantity of the items or any other relevant measurements. The rate. This column is meant for listing the price or cost per unit of the item. It's the price at which each unit of the item is being sold or purchased. The total. The total column is used to calculate the total cost or value for each item or product listed. This is typically calculated by multiplying the quantity by the rate and is used to determine the total cost for each line item. So for example, if you're buying 5 units of an item at the rate of $10 each, the total cost will be 5 times 10 is $50. Depending on the purpose of the table, you can format it to make it more visually appealing or easier to read. You can also use the table for various purposes, such as creating invoices, purchase orders, price lists, or any documents where you need to list items and their associated costs. That's it for this table that lists the deliveries of the contract. But a contract isn't complete without the terms and conditions. And that's why we need to have a look at the ones provided. Take a note that the terms and conditions section in a contract is important because it's the core of the agreement, setting out the rules, obligations, and the rights of both parties. The terms and conditions are where the heart of the agreement lies. It contains vital clauses that dictate how the deal will proceed. Okay, the terms and conditions. The effective date of the agreement. The agreement officially takes effect when both parties sign it. It clarifies that any prior negotiations, verbal or written, are overridden by the written agreement. It establishes the point at which the agreement takes effect, providing a clear starting date for performance. The manner of payment. This section outlines how the payment for the goods or services will occur. It specifies the total price and how it should be paid, including the down payment, the advanced payment, and the final balance. It also notes that certain expenses related to the technical staff accommodations and food during commissioning are the seller's responsibility. The delivery of the products. This part addresses the delivery process. It grants the buyer the right to change the delivery location under reasonable circumstances. It also states that ownership of the product transfers to the buyer upon delivery. The buyer is expected to perform acceptance procedures during the delivery. If the seller fails to deliver on time, there's a penalty clause, specifying the late delivery penalty in terms of a percentage of the product's value. Inspection and acceptance. This clause clarifies that making the payment doesn't automatically mean the goods are accepted. The buyer or authorized representatives have the right to inspect the products during delivery. If the goods don't meet specifications or are faulty, they can be rejected and returned to the seller at the seller's expenses. Mechanical warranty. This section explains the warranty for the product, including the duration and starting point of the warranty. It also specifies that the buyer must use the seller's authorized technical services for warranty work. Limitations of liability. Here, the contract limits the seller liability and outlines the buyer's resource in the case of delivery delays. Termination. It details the conditions under which each party can terminate the agreement. It includes a grace period for the defaulting party to rectify any breaches of obligations before termination is allowed. Force majeure. Force majeure refers to unforeseeable circumstances that prevent the parties from fulfilling their obligations. This section establishes that if such an event occurs, the affected party must inform the other party promptly and the contract's obligations may be suspended temporarily. If the force majeure event persists beyond a certain period, the parties will negotiate how to proceed. Confidentially. This clause obligates both parties to keep all information obtained during the execution of the agreement confidential. However, it provides exceptions for information that was already known or information that has become public. Signatures. The contract concludes with space for the signatures of the seller, buyer, and the witnesses. Signatures formalize the agreement, and the presence of witnesses can add an extra layer of authenticity. Take note that each selection of the agreement is crucial for different reasons. They collectively establish a clear legal framework for the transaction, helping to prevent misunderstandings, disputes, and legal issues, while ensuring that the rights and obligations of both parties are clearly defined and protected. And that's a wrap. Congratulations on finishing this lesson about procurement contract. Now it's time to hand out the contract to your chosen supplier and seal the deal. Thank you for joining us.